Hello, and welcome back, everyone. We are here for another exciting episode of our Free Speech Forward podcast, one that I'm looking forward to. This is somewhat of a sequel to the episode we did with Frank, so if you haven't caught that one yet, be sure to go back and check that one out. And today, here, our podcast, the collaboration between 1776 Forward, the organization that I've co founded with my co host here, Chris, and this is our collaboration with the Institute for Liberal Values. And we're delighted here to have Wenyuan with us today. And Chris is going to tell you all about her and get us started.
Great. Thanks, Joy. And hi, Wenyuan. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here speaking with you.
Great. When we're so honored to have you. So thank you for your time. Before we begin, just a little bit of background for our listeners on Wenyuan. She works with the Californians for Equal Rights Foundation, which we spoke with Frank Shu previously, the president of that organization, and Wenyuan previously served as executive director of the No on 13 campaign. Look that up if you're not familiar with that one. And prior to that, she was director of administration at the Asian American Coalition for Education, AACE. She holds a PhD in international studies from the University of Miami and has authored a book, Chinese Oil Enterprises in Latin America, Corporate Social Responsibility, as well as many chapters in other books. In her official capacity, Dr. Wu has been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, NBC News, NPR, Boston Globe, and many other media organizations. So, illustrious background. Let's dive right in. You certainly have had lots of experience with media and nonprofit organizations that touch on free speech issues. So why don't you tell us how you first came to being a leader for free speech issues?
Well, first of all, I just want to put out a disclaimer here that I am by no means an expert on this issue, but a casual observer of issues both in higher education and 12 people. I started my career as an advocate and activist to issues related to rights, equal justice, and equal treatment. And that was back in 2018. Fast forward 2020, current organization, the Californians for Education, we did a good campaign as a campaign coalition previously to push back successfully against a race preferential ballot initiative in California, and we won big. And soon after that, we realized that there are a lot of other consequential issues going on just because we successfully defended a constitutional ban on racial preferences in California out of all states. Doesn't mean that we can just sit back and relax. There is so much going on. And the year of 2020 also coincided with the summer of racial reckoning. So the first case that I worked on related to free speech was in late 2020. I was contacted in my CFR capacity by a computer programmer down in San Diego, California. His name is Bob, and he basically told me that he was fired for speaking up against the BLM movement at his foundation, at his institute. He worked for the Salk Institute, which was a world-leading biomedical research organization, private organization in San Diego. And in the summer of 2020, I think around June, he responded to an institutional email calling for institutional support for BLM, and he he criticized that movement. He said, well, Black lives matter, white lives matter, all lives matter. How about good lives matter? It's seemingly it's provocative when you put that into the context of that summer and of our decade, the last decade also, with regard to political correctness, ideological capture, and racial identity politics. So when he said that, it just started a series of investigations and retaliation against Bob. He was rebuked by his colleagues and, more importantly, his superiors. They um, they criticized him for being a white man, old white man, making us feel unsafe. And he was disciplined. He was subjected to a 6-month-long investigation, and he was asked to work at home, take mandatory sensitivity training. He did all that. He agreed to all that in an effort to keep his job. But they still let him go because he refused to openly admit that he did anything wrong in his original email that triggered the investigations and the retaliation. So I talked to him, connected him with some friends with in the legal profession, and I wrote an article detailing his story. And the article, you can find it on Minding the Campus, to which I contribute regularly as a columnist. The title of the article is "Would Galileo Be Good Enough for Woke America?" So that started my my journey, per se, my research and my advocacy. The more I read the issue, the foundational idea of speech is so intertwined with it all. I uh, if individuals or Americans are treated differently on the basis of their diverse group identities. So these two values are interrelated, and that's that's a long intro. I apologize for.
No, it's great. I mean, everyone has a different story, and we love hearing all the different stories, and how each person comes to it is unique, but often the ones where you experience kind of a direct threat, either yourself or someone you know and close to you, and their ability to speak freely, those often are the best or the most inspiring examples, because unfortunately they also highlight the critical importance of it. So that's even, I think, a good segue into kind of my next question for you, which, and you started to touch upon it, but why, how did that event perhaps concretize for you and make clearer the value of free speech to you personally and or for society at large?
Personally, it feels that the event just spoke to me intimately about um, the danger and the grave concerns that we all should have as a society on various attacks from all angles, but in this particular event from the far left, on free speech, on freedom of expression, and that just made it clear that this can happen not only to professors and employees in the field of public education. It can also happen to the private sector. Nobody is safe even a computer programmer who was not politically active, not that I know previous to this incident, he could be targeted. And I've worked on similar cases, and that just the more I work on these cases, the more I talk to victims of cancellation, victims of free speech attacks, the more I realize that this is a problem that's plaguing the whole society, and the ones that we interact with, either in our professional life or in our personal life. Nobody is safe, and therefore we need to push back and work together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we in the movement for free speech who consciously value it and seek to elevate it in the discourse and in the culture take for granted the value of it. But as your own example and the others that you've encountered, I think highlight, even in a place like the US, where perhaps legally the right to free speech is still very strong, culturally the value is weakening, and that's the main reason why we even started this podcast, was to draw attention to its value. So really appreciate you making that point. Maybe to transition a little bit, but also related to what you said, is you kind of have encountered more people who have been canceled, had their speech rights squelched or censored, etc., and become an advocate and leader for it yourself, or a voice even for the voiceless. Um, we like to maybe draw out some of the principles that people like yourself use to either prepare for a talk on the issue or to write a piece. You obviously have been published copiously. So, can you maybe give us a couple insights to how you prepare your own work to be an effective communicator for these values out in the culture?
Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing for me in my media outreach efforts, or um, in my local organizing efforts, is that we have to root our writings, speeches, and our message in facts. So when I write on free speech and on other issues that I'm interested in, as a columnist, as an op-ed writer, for instance, I tend to use a lot of data and examples. For instance, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression just released a survey on the state of free speech and self-censorship in higher education. The survey asked questions about to about 6,000 faculty members at 55 major universities and colleges. And it found out that 87% of the faculty members reported that they found it very difficult to have an open and honest conversation on their campus about at least one hot button political topic. About 28% said that they at least occasionally engage in self-censorship, and that's highly skewed towards faculty members who are considered conservative. So I think when we write, when we communicate to the public, it's important to draw out, to shine a light on statistics and numbers which don't lie, and when the a lot of these shocking evidence and shocking facts, it takes them aback, but it also makes them think. This is really this is, like you said, the value is in cultural decline. It's not the political. It's not politically popular, to say the least, right? But how do we make a point? So we use data and we use stories. Storytelling is is really great. There's a story that I use very often when I write about free speech or when I talk about free speech. There is this case of a first grader student at from the Capistrano Unified School District in Orange County, California. And when she drew a picture on BLM, there was a classroom exercise or coloring activity on uh, with a BLM picture, and she wrote any over the word any over the word black. And after that, she was targeted. She was reprimanded. She was only 6 years old at the time. She was targeted by the school principal, by uh, some parents of African American students in
Wow.
the school, that parents had to pull her out, and they actually moved to Florida. So I use that as a glaring example of how the culture warfare has not only affected grown-ups but also the young and vulnerable members of our society.
Wow, that is on the one hand, I can't say I'm totally surprised to hear that, but I still am also surprised, right? That even in America, that kind of stuff would happen, that people would assume malign intent from a 6-year-old, right?
Right.
Which I think, perhaps as the example illustrates, it's more we the adults who are, kind of projecting these values or lack thereof onto the children, and then of course that's where they learn it. But I mean, that's therein you're demonstrating the power of the storytelling right there. So much point taken. One question, I'm sure you've thought about this yourself, having dealt on the issue, but one question we like to ask all of our guests is where, if resources, money, time, etc., focus weren't, cultural interest, even on the matter, weren't a limitation, where do you think the most impactful investment could be made to grow the value of free speech in the culture again?
I think we need to, as a society and as individuals who have come together to embrace the value of free speech, we need to have open and brave conversations on the intersections of Christianity and free speech and the founding of America, with free speech or freedom of expression as one of the foundational values. I'm a Christian myself. I've turned my life over to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ since 2018, and I'm not shy about it. And I want to, as a Christian, investigate the close relationship between um, the theology, which should be practical, and and the values that we so take for granted as Americans. One of which is free speech. So I know that it may not be something that um, you hear a lot, but that would be my.
Yeah, well, that's why we like this question, because it is as different an individual of an answer from each guest as we are as people. And I mean, I think you certainly are hitting at core truth that we certainly advocate, which is kind of the connection between political values and deeper philosophical values. They come out of a deeper philosophical framework. So of which religion is obviously one of those foundations. So thank you for that. And we're almost out of time, but as a last kind of question, we like to ask people like yourself who are leading on this issue any words of advice you would give to um, people out there trying to find their voice, either people who have already been censored, the people you deal with a lot, or people who just are trying to find their courage and their voice to begin with. how they might better stand up and speak out on the matter like you do.
Don't be afraid. And if you cannot be the first to speak out against things, rhetoric, and actions that you see as problematic, be the second. If you cannot be the second, be the third. With that being said, there are advocates, activists, and organizations out there fighting to preserve free speech. And I just want to throw it out there to those who think that they're fighting alone, because you can't feel alone, especially when you are engaged in an environment that's culturally and politically hostile or unaccommodating. Seek out your allies and your friends. Use the internet. Look for organizations like the Institute of Liberal Values, like my own organization, FIRE. There are so many out there, and we're all over the place. We have like-minded friends all across the United States, and it's when you seek out advice and friendship, you will find that we are actually in the majority. We're just decentralized, dispersed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't.
Wonderful. Yeah, you're not alone. I think that's great because I think that is a common sentiment and fear for people, particularly like you said, when they're either in a hostile environment or they feel that they're in the minority. So thank you for sharing that. That's certainly what our organization, I know our partner ILV, sounds like your own work, we're all aiming towards is raising more awareness to the fact that we are out here and we are the majority, hopefully, or at least we're trying to rebuild a majority for these values. So thank you so much for your time, Wenyuan. And for all of our listeners out there, that completes our podcast for today. As always, you can find us either on ILV's website, ilvalues.org, under their podcast page, The Dissidents, as well as under their Dissidents page for most streaming channels, YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc., or on our website. There's a link to our videos and podcasts as well, 1776forward.com. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thanks, Wenyuan.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you.